environmentalism and anti-militarism, I can tell you, just based upon the scopes of the work of North American Indian Center of Boston, we're going into we're in our 50th year of service for the New England Native American community, which includes American Indians, Alaska Natives, First Nations who go to Boston under the Jay Treaty, and other indigenous peoples within New England. We do work, we currently have an initiative called the Massachusetts Indigenous Legislative Agenda, and it's with that we partner with organizations such as Massachusetts Peace Action and Mass 350. Along with other organizations like United American Indians of New England is another important partner. But we have 5 issues across a number of bills. Taking down native mascots. 40 public schools in Massachusetts have these mascots. Changing up the flag and seal of Massachusetts. It's a banner that makes it very hard to do the work that we do because it's evocative of King Philip's War that was fought almost 350 years ago. And still to this day, when we do civic engagement in Massachusetts, we are doing it under a flag with a native figure that has been composited, taking the head of Thomas Littleshell, an Ojibwe chief, the bones of a Massachusetts person who was excavated in an archaeological dig, and above him is the disembodied arm of Miles Standish brandishing a sword. And the motto of Massachusetts, we seek peace but by the sword.
Wow.
So there's mascots, there's the flag and seal, there's Indigenous Peoples Day over Christopher Columbus Day, but we're also pushing for state alignment with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and also a state education commission for American Indian and Alaska Native students, 79% graduation rate, 2 times the rate of suicide, that of their white peers. So we're trying to do everything we can to get our kids healthy, out of school, into colleges, and become more civically engaged so that they can talk about these issues of anti-militarism and environmental justice. And we can't just do trade-off. We can't divest from fossil fuels and then go down to Bolivia and extract all the lithium for electric cars. That flies in the face of indigenous sovereignty. You know, when we talk about Wet'suwet'en in Canada right now, the struggle is between the hereditary chiefs, the people that are standing for the traditional culture, the language, all of the the ancient knowledge, and then those band councils that are there for economic development, making sure that there's some kind of revenue stream. And that's not something that we deal with here. We have to deal internally with our own tribal governments that are making these decisions based upon what's going to bring in cash versus what is going to help us stand on our ancestral knowledge.
Hi, my name is Makasi Matema. I organize with People's Power Assemblies. We've done a lot of work in terms of Black Lives Matter. We've been doing it for well over 5 years now. And right now we have a campaign going on against the MTA's fare evasion. You might have seen, some of the protests going on, a lot of coalition groups working on that. And we want to highlight the role that racism plays in terms of the way that the MTA and the city in general is trying to extract wealth from poor people and people of color. And we also beyond just the sanctions campaign, we like to draw the connections between racism at home and overseas. So we do a lot of anti-war protesting, and we try to remind people that these issues are connected. I mean, just as an example, in ways that people don't necessarily think about it. If you look at the death of Trayvon Martin, for example, that was a situation where you had this murderer, George Zimmerman, who's saying he fears for his life from this incredibly small young kid. And it's like, this is a pathology of white supremacy. And if we look at it as, if we only look at it as something that happens within the United States, we kind of miss the whole story. I mean, you can connect the pathology of white supremacy to the Iraq War. Like, the United States is the most powerful military on earth. And for some reason, we came out and said, we're afraid of Saddam Hussein and their weapons of mass destruction. That's the United States saying, we're afraid of a person of color. And they're armed and dangerous, and we have to do something about them. So at People's Power Assembly, like, those are the connections that we try to make. And right now, the newest campaign we're doing is the campaign against U.S. sanctions. Because sanctions kill, because they do. The weekend of March 14th, we're encouraging people to take actions in whatever city they organize in, and we're hoping to build something big.
So we have all these various issues, and Jeff did a really good job sort of talking about the connections between militarism, racism, and the environment. But I wanted to ask you specifically, given your area of work, how racism is used to perpetuate American wars of aggression abroad.
That's a good question. I don't think you can have American wars abroad without racism. Like, everything about our justification for war, I look at countries that we're interfering with right now, Bolivia, Venezuela. One of the first things they say about a country to get the American public to criticize and to feel comfortable with intervention is they say the country is corrupt, like it's plagued by corruption. And words are important. Corruption means that you're willing to take a bribe, it means that you're dishonest, it means that you're a liar. If someone said that Bolivia was plagued with liars, we would all understand that that is an incredibly racist thing to say. But the media and the US government codes their language and they say it's plagued by corruption, and so they get to say it. They put the idea in our head, but they don't have to take credit for their racism. And as soon as you say that, people believe it. And why do people believe it? Because when it comes to people of color, we believe that they're more criminal. Like, that's the pathology again. That's the pathology of white supremacy, is that we're trained from when we're young to believe that people of color are more criminal. That's why when Ronald Reagan said that there were welfare queens, we immediately believe it. Like, yeah, you can't trust people of color with money. You can't trust people of color to run their own governments. You can't trust people of color to maintain a democracy. So you need white people to come in and basically fix it for them. And so the US government, they drop these terms and people believe it because they've been forced by white supremacy their whole lives. Right, so Andrew Jackson is a genocidal monster, right? So, and that's a president who goes back a while. Like, that's not a recent president. So in terms of Donald Trump's racism, I think Donald Trump is as American as apple pie. I don't think there's anything new about that. In terms of his incompetence, I think that you couldn't have a president like Donald Trump unless the capitalist state that we have now is in such a state of deterioration. I mean, the empire is coming off the rails, and that's why we would allow someone who's not just as racist as Donald Trump, but as incompetent as Donald Trump to come into power. And what that says to me is that that's not going to get better. We're not going to have a better president after Donald Trump. We're not going to have a less racist president after Donald Trump. What we're going to have is desperate white supremacist capitalism trying to take as much as it possibly can, mostly from people of color, but from the working class generally. And unless we organize to stop that, we're in trouble.
The environmental crisis is creating the chaos. It's a cycle, but we have to be the ones, the activists have to be the ones that tell them, remove the curtain, lift the veil, and point the finger at the military-industrial complex, the US military, because they are the world's largest polluter. So, you know, it's our job to get the word out, because the propaganda machine is strong. The propaganda machine that is funded by the military-industrial complex and the fossil fuel industry. So, you know, and again, at the same time, the government and the oil industry is putting out their massive propaganda denying climate change.
It creates a generation of young people today where a majority of the youth under 29 and now under 39 prefer a vision of socialism rather than capitalism.
For the environment, are we, you know, sort of past the point of no return when it comes to the impact that capitalism and imperialism have had on the planet Earth and really human survival? I mean, what would be the next most important thing that we have to do to make sure that we can be successful in our environmental justice campaigns? Anybody?
Destroy capitalism.
All right. That's all I needed to hear. We can move on.